We are officially a few weeks into the NFL season, and some players and teams have started off on both the right and wrong foot. Teams like the Buffalo Bills and Minnesota Vikings have started off exactly how they wanted to, and through 3 games, they are each 3-0 and are looking to make deep postseason runs. But not every team has started off like the Bills and Vikings, for better or worse, and there has been a lot of surprises through the first few weeks of the 2024 season. I don't think anybody would have believed you if you would have said that the Ravens and Panthers each had the same record through 3 weeks of the NFL season, and that both the Panthers and Giants would actually have a better record than the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, 3 games and change does not determine an NFL season, and there's a reason it's referred to as a marathon and not a sprint, but in today's video we are going to be discussing the biggest surprises of the NFL season so far. This is not a ranking of surprises, but we are going to break down a couple of situations around the league. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing the Washington Commanders and how good their offense has looked. Points around the NFL are down, and only 6 teams have put up 20 or more points in each of their 3 games. It probably wouldn't surprise you that both the Bills and Chiefs have, along with the Ravens, Vikings, Seahawks, and the Commanders. Now, it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows for Washington through the first 3 weeks, but the game on Monday night in Week 3 against Cincinnati was one of the best games this franchise has played in years. And they've went through it over the past 20 years, and seeing Jayden Daniels provide a spark and excitement that really only RG3 did in his rookie season back in 2012 was a very cool moment for this team and fan base. And in this game, Jayden set a rookie completion percentage record as he completed over 91% of his passes, as he was on his way to a 21 of 23 performance with 254 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. And not only that, but he had more total touchdowns with 3 than he did incompletions with 2. It was also nice to see Terry McLaurin have a huge game and haul in the game-sealing touchdown pass, because if you followed Terry's career, then you know he's had a handful of quarterbacks throw him passes over the years, and it looks like he finally has a guy that can throw him passes for the next few years. The reason we include the Commanders in today's video is because there was a lot of concern around this team entering this season, and I thought they would improve from last year to this year, as it was kind of hard to do worse than they did in 2023, and while I expected occasional flash plays from Jayden throughout his rookie year, I didn't expect to see this type of game in his 3rd career start, and we will break this down more in a video later this year when there's more of a sample size, but with how complex NFL defenses are in today's era, starting a rookie quarterback and expecting him to have a great season or a 2023 CJ Stroud type season is almost impossible. And it would be premature to say Jayden is going to have a CJ Stroud type rookie year, but just seeing the flashes this early is very promising. And not only that, but it's also encouraging for the run game too. Having a quarterback that has the mobility of a Jayden Daniels or a Lamar Jackson opens up everything else, and through 3 games, I don't think it should come as a surprise that the Commanders are top 10 in rushing attempts, yards, and touchdowns. And I've had a theory for a while that the Ravens have had the consistent success they've had against NFC teams because, as simple as this sounds, defenses aren't used to how much ground Lamar Jackson covers, and the opposing defenses are absolutely gassed by halftime. And while it would also be very premature to say Jayden will be a 2-time MVP like Lamar, he does have similar impact in the ground game, and he has to be accounted for every single play. Yes, the Commanders' defense has struggled as they've allowed 30 or more points in 2 of their 3 games, but the season was never about the Commanders' defense. It was never about Dan Quinn taking this team to a top 5 defense. It was about developing their rookie quarterback, and through the first few weeks, he has been one of the biggest surprises in the NFL. And before we continue, I have teamed up with DraftKings, and with a long season of football ahead of us, now is a great time to jump in all the action playing daily fantasy at my partners, DraftKings. New customers download the DraftKings app and use code ANALYSIS for a free shot at a share of millions in prizes with your first $5 deposit. and it's pretty simple. To play, just draft your roster, and those players earn points based on their in-game performance. And with the first deposit of $5, new customers can play for a share of millions in total prizes. If you're like me, you're already going to be watching the games, as that's what I do every Sunday during the fall, and I would imagine most of you do too, so why not spice it up and give it a shot? So what are you waiting for? Download the DraftKings app, and new customers who use my promo code ANALYSIS can play for a share of millions in total prizes with just a $5 deposit on the DraftKings app. That's code ANALYSIS only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Up I-270 to the PA Turnpike and eventually to the Steel City to discuss the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers are a hard-nosed football team that is a great representation of their city, hard-nosed, gritty, and willing to go the extra mile for the win. And as a former resident of Pittsburgh, it's been incredible watching their defense through the first few games. And Justin Fields too, which we'll get to in a minute. The Steelers have allowed 26 points in 3 games, and they've allowed just 689 total yards in those 3 games. They've been absolutely suffocating opposing offenses, and of the 3 games they've played so far, the one against the Falcons best shows this. They allowed just 226 yards of offense and held them to 89 yards on the ground. I think we can all agree that Bijan Robinson is one of the best running backs in all of football, and they held him to just 68 yards on 18 carries. Bijan's longest carry in that game went for just 13 yards, and a lot of the time I like to exclude a single carry, or in opposing quarterback's case, the longest throw, so you can get a real average or feel for what the player did on that day. Bijan had 2 carries of 10 plus yards out of 18 on the day, and excluding those 2 carries for him, he had 16 carries for just 45 yards, and that's the type of day offenses have had against the Steelers in 2024. 68 yards on 18 carries is already not good to begin with, but there were a couple of outlier runs for him on a day where the Falcons' offense couldn't get going. Pittsburgh took care of business in Week 2 against Denver and a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix, and what I think was most impressive about this win for the Steelers was holding Denver's ground game in check as much as they did. I understand Javonte Williams has been disappointing in 2024, but to hold any NFL back to an 11-carry, 17-yard performance is downright insane. Pittsburgh went into that game, on the road by the way, with the goal in mind to make a rookie quarterback beat their team in Bo Nix. Bo ended up being the leading rusher in this game, and it's much easier said than done to execute your game plan the exact way you planned. They also held the Chargers to 10 total points in Week 3 and 168 yards of offense. I think it is worth noting that the Chargers had several players get hurt in this game, but what I would also say was the Steelers were dominating defensively before it got to that point. J.K. Dobbins had over 130 yards rushing in each of the first 2 games and was held to less than 3 yards per carry. The Steelers have allowed 26 points through 3 games, which ranks first. 52 points is double 26, and that's how many points the Jets have allowed through 3 games, and they rank 8th. 24 teams have allowed more than double the points the Steelers have allowed through 3 games, and that's almost an unfathomable statistic. I'm not having the Justin Fields long-term franchise quarterback discussion, but he is obviously their guy for the remainder of 2024, and he looked great against the Chargers. They let the training wheels off in Week 3, and Justin more than played his part. I thought the Steelers' defense would be good, but I didn't think it would be this good just a few weeks in. And I absolutely love Justin coming out of Ohio State, and I'm hoping that he has a Baker or Geno route and has a good career on another team, and a few weeks into the season, he's off to a great start. If you want to say, well, look at who the Steelers have played, well, they can't control their schedule. And trust me, they have a lot of difficult games ahead. There's another AFC North team unfortunately off to a bad start, and it's the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati is 0-3 after a stunning 38-33 loss to the Commanders in Week 3. The surprise here with the Bengals is how disappointing they've been through the first 3 games. Now, I do want to preface this part of the video and say that I think they will turn it around, and it could start as early as Week 4 against the Carolina Panthers, but it's more than just starting 0-3. It's how they've started 0-3. The Week 1 loss to the Patriots was incredibly frustrating as they allowed 170 yards on the ground to New England, and the time of possession battle wasn't all that close as New England won the battle 34-26. Jacoby Brissett threw for just 121 yards, and the Patriots only put up 16 points, yet it was enough to go into the jungle and win. I know a lot of people want to focus on the pass interference call at the end of the Chiefs-Bengals game, but just being honest, it should have never came down to that. I understand Bengals fans are incredibly frustrated with defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo after the loss to the Commanders, in which they allowed a rookie quarterback to lead a team not just to 38 points, but an entire game without punting, and the frustration is completely valid. But the Bengals allowed Patrick Mahomes to just 151 yards passing and even threw 2 interceptions. This was without a doubt one of the worst games Patrick has played in his career, yet it wasn't enough to get a win. Cincy also won the turnover battle 3-1. They held Kansas City to just 1 of 8 on third down, outgained them by over 30 yards, and also won the time of possession battle too. The Washington game was awful, as aside from the obvious, they had very little pass rush and were not consistently getting home either. I don't worry about the Bengals offense, as Joe, Jamar, and T have proven themselves countless times over the years, but I greatly worry about the defense and how they're going to be able to stop teams when it matters. Trey Hendrickson is an elite player, and he took over the Kansas City game and had a terrific game, but what I think is scary for Cincy moving forward is, in a game where you held Patrick Mahomes to one of his worst career games, the entire Bengals team had just 9 pressures, with 6 of them coming from Hendrickson. And what I am surprised about with Cincinnati is how bad they've been at times through the first few games. And in theory, Sam Hubbard could turn it around, but he has been nothing short of a liability through 3 games. I know Cincinnati starts slow every year, and I get it, but I don't think it's a good thing to consistently start years 0-2 and kind of just wave your hand and shrug and say, oh well, we'll be good because we're the Bengals and we shouldn't worry about it. I was surprised to see the lack of urgency, and not only the lack of urgency, but there was a quote from head coach Zach Taylor that said corner Cam Taylor-Britt doesn't need to take shots in the media, which was referring to a comment he made about Washington, saying they ran a, quote, college offense, end quote. This situation doesn't look good at the moment, and I think they will win against Carolina in week 4, but I am surprised with just how many things the Bengals have done wrong so far. The Las Vegas Raiders make today's video for a few separate reasons, and for me it boils down to how disappointing they've been through the first 3 weeks. Now, I will be the first to admit, left hand up, I was ecstatic when they brought back Antonio Pierce to be the team's full head coach and to remove the interim tag. I loved this hire for a few reasons. The first was, whenever you bring in a former player, specifically a guy like Antonio Pierce or a guy like Dan Campbell, you are bringing a head coach in to be gritty, to, in a sense, be a motivator, and to get the best out of every player on the team. And very similar to what Dan Campbell said in his opening press conference with the Lions, where we may get knocked down 7 times, but when we stand back up in the 8th time, we might take a huck out of a kneecap, and when push comes to shove, we're going to be the last one standing, and we're going to do what it takes to win a football game. And I thought there was very similar energy there with Antonio Pierce. And the reality is the Raiders are not a bad football team. Now, I don't think they are Super Bowl champion caliber football team, but they went 5-4 with AP as their head coach last year, and there was one game in particular, the Vikings 3-0 win that Minnesota had, that if a couple of things go different, they very easily could have been 6-3 with Antonio Pierce, and I think if the 2023 Raiders go 9-8 rather than 8-9, that the expectations heading into this year are a lot different, and we would have been talking about this team in an entirely different manner. But why I'm particularly frustrated with the Raiders is not really the fact they're 1-2, because every team is going to lose games, but it's how they've lost each of the 2 games, and even within the win against the Ravens, I mean, you can argue that the Ravens should have won that game and that was more of a Ravens choke job rather than a Raiders dominant performance. Although a win is a win, never apologize for the wins. But that was not a standard win by any means. But within the 2 Raiders losses, the Chargers loss wasn't great. They only put up 10 points. And then, of course, we had the infamous decision to punt the ball in the 4th quarter on the 45-yard line. That was an awful decision, and that should have never happened. The loss against Carolina was one of the worst losses you'll see from any team all season when you factor in everything that led into that game. The Carolina Panthers had not led in the 4th quarter since the 2022 season, since before Bryce Young was drafted. And they had a couple of wins during Bryce Young's rookie year, but they were on field goals as time expired. They beat the Texans 15-13 as time expired, and they beat the Falcons 9-7 as time expired. So Andy Dalton comes in and lights your defense up for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in your stadium. And not only that, but the Raiders also paid Christian Wilkins over $100 million, and through 3 games, he hasn't been worth the contract, and I do think Christian will turn it around. I want that part noted. But for what Antonio Pierce was brought in to do, to motivate guys, to, be the gritty team, we're going to be the last one standing, we really haven't seen that from the Raiders at all in 2024, aside from what I would consider a Ravens choke job rather than a Raiders win. And I think what was the worst part about the Panthers game in week 3 was this game wasn't even close. I mean, the Panthers were at a point up 33-7 in the 4th quarter, and the Raiders did a little painting to make the game look a little closer than how it was actually played. But that is an absolutely embarrassing loss, and they also lost by double digits in week 1 to the Chargers. And all in all, the Raiders have been a very disappointing team through 3 weeks, and I'm not really worried about the 1-2 record. I'm worried about how they lost the games and how they've looked in the process. And what also concerns me and what honestly disappoints me was the fact that Antonio Pierce, in a press conference after the Panthers game, said there were a lot of individuals making business decisions, and we're going to make business decisions this week. This all goes back to having AP as the head coach and getting the most out of guys, and we're 3 weeks into a season where Raiders players are already making business decisions. So when you factor in all of this, I have a lot of concerns with the Raiders moving forward, and I, again, never thought they were going to be a Super Bowl caliber team. I thought that they were going to be better than what we've seen so far. But one other concern that I have with the Raiders, and why they're also part of a surprise in today's video, is just how bad the run game has been through 3 games. I was not a fan of the Luke Getsy hire when it was made, but there's so much dysfunction within the Raiders offensive line. They are currently averaging less than 3 yards per carry. There's clearly assignments where they are flat out missing guys defensively that they should be picking up, and they're not. I also don't think Zamir White or Alexander Madison are that good of players. So when you factor in everything, the Raiders have been pretty disappointing, and to be honest with you guys, I don't really know what the long-term fix is, and I don't think there is a solution in 2024. I think this team is going to win anywhere between 4 and 7 games, and that they're very much going to be on to 2025, and that's not what I was expecting this year. I was expecting a lot of close losses. Maybe, we pull 1 or 2 out. Maybe we split the Chiefs. And they still can split the Chiefs. Maybe we split the Chargers, and maybe we're the 8 or the 9 seed, and Antonio Pierce looks to be the guy for 2025 and beyond. Obviously, this would be within a quarterback situation that's not ideal for anybody, but there's a lot more issues to the Raiders right now than just the quarterback play, and that's why I think they're one of the biggest surprises so far through the early parts of the 2024 season, and not in a good way. So that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 31% of people watching are subscribed. It helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.